When I saw Zach Walker's number come up on my phone, my heart sank a little. It was late and dark and I was flying down the highway in the middle of Missouri, and I assumed that he was calling to tell me that another of our friends, a classmate from our basic underwater demolition/SEAL training class, Bud/S-237, had been killed. Walker and I were in the same training class in 2001 and 2002 in Southern California. We'd shared a lot together, served together, and suffered together. After graduation, he went to the East Coast and I stayed in the West Coast. I saw him for a few minutes in 2004. Walker was back from Afghanistan, working in the training cadre, and I ran into him when he came to San Diego for a few days of maritime operations training. It was a busy day, we were both running in different directions, and except for those few minutes, I hadn't seen Walker in 11 years. It wasn't bad news about one of our friends, and for that I was grateful. But Walker was calling me for help, and that wasn't what I was expecting. In a class of tough guys, Walker was one of the toughest. A kid from a Northern California logging family, he was the kind of guy who, even standing in formation, clean-shaven, in a pressed uniform and spit-shined boots, still seemed as if he was wearing a beard and had just run out of the woods covered in mud and blood after wrestling a mountain lion. It's not that he was dirty in any way, just that you couldn't shine the tough out of him. Walker was also the kind of guy who would do anything for someone he loved. People like to say that a lot. He'd give you the shirt off his back or he'd run through a brick wall for you. Walker wasn't quite like that. If you really needed a shirt, he'd climb over a brick wall, rip a shirt off of some pompous ass, climb back over the wall, and give you the shirt you deserved and, he had decided, the other poor bastard didn't. He was motivated by a deep sense of justice. He wanted to know what was fair, what was right, and he was willing to fight for it. What was also true of Walker, and was true of most of the guys in my class, was that he could have lived quite happily 200 or even 2,000 years ago. He had a truck, but didn't need it. He had boots, but could have gotten on fine in bare feet. And it's not just that he was capable of living without modern luxuries, it was also that, even for a guy in his 20s, he had a moral sensibility with an air of the ancient. He believed in courage. He believed in action. He believed in loyalty. If you've ever thought, if I was ever in a really tight spot, I could call. I hope you have someone in your life like Zach Walker. He told me how bad things had gotten for him. After 6 years in the SEAL teams, he went home to Northern California. By then he had a wife and a son. He bought a concrete pumper and started a business. He helped people out around town. He raised his boy. He looked, to all outward appearances, to be fine. One day he pulled into his driveway. He stepped out of his truck and dropped to the ground. A sniper had an eye on his position, or so he thought, and Walker lay prone next to his truck, breathing slowly in, slowly out. He moved not at all, but for the blink of his eyelids. Hours later, as the sun began to set, he sprang to his feet and bolted into the house. Walker is a guy who shouldn't drink. He almost never could stop at one beer, and even after one, you might find him on the pub patio, standing on a chair and making a speech. Later you'd hear a thrown bottle crash on the concrete as he emphasized a point. He was a guy who almost always listened intently, maybe too intently, to what was going on around him. But you put one beer in him and he went deaf. A few weeks after he landed back home a hero, his brother Ed drove his truck into a tree. Ed was drunk when he killed himself. Walker, a guy who always made connections, began to wonder, did Ed die as punishment for what I did in Afghanistan? Home now, and his brother dead, he started to drink more. True to form, Walker did little in moderation. Sitting in his backyard on the weekend, he'd go through not a case but a cooler full of beer. Then he told me about the night he got arrested. You know how when a good friend starts a story and, 5 words in, you can tell where it's going? This wouldn't be good. He was downtown. He'd been drinking in a restaurant. He sees his wife pull up and he walks out to get some money from her. A police officer asks him to hold on a second. Walker says he's just going to get some money from his wife to pay his bill. He points at her in the car. The officer grabs Walker by the shoulder. And here it gets messy. They get the cuffs on Walker. Blood is trickling down his face, and he asks in drunken clarity, "Can we talk for a minute about what's going on here?" No. They put him in the patrol car. They charge him with a felony, resisting arrest. Walker is confused. He's been drinking, sure. But what has he done wrong? His docs at the VA diagnose him with post-traumatic stress disorder. But they don't prescribe exercise or community service. They do prescribe a raft of pills. What's going to happen in court? Walker was in the wrong. He's apologetic. But that's not worth a lot. And the truth is, if it wasn't this incident with the cops, it would have been something else. Maybe drinking and driving. Maybe he would have killed himself behind the wheel like his brother. Or worse, maybe he would have killed someone else. All things considered, there's only one man at fault here, and it's Walker. Now the war hero dad is an unemployed alcoholic on disability who looks as if he's on his way to jail. We talk. For a few years I'd had a bunch of thoughts, based on my humanitarian work overseas, my time in the military, and my work with veterans, about how people move through hardship to happiness, through pain to wisdom, through suffering to strength. Our phone call brought them to the surface. It was late when I got home, but when I did, I put some of those thoughts in a letter to Walker. He wrote back. One letter followed another. We talked a lot, we kept writing. This book is an edited set of those letters. They are letters to my friend. But while his story is unique, what he's up against, loss, fear, a search for purpose, is not. In fact, what he's up against is universal. So, with my friend's blessing, but with his name changed to protect his privacy, I've collected these letters on resilience in the hope that they might benefit you too.